The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Bragg's training grounds as Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez adjusted his tactical vest for the third time. At 28, he had earned his reputation as one of the most promising officers in the 82nd Airborne Division through a combination of textbook precision and natural leadership abilities that seemed to emerge during the most challenging situations. His men respected him, his superiors trusted his judgment, and he had never failed to complete a mission successfully. Rodriguez had been expecting another routine briefing when he received orders to report to the Special Operations Command building. The imposing structure housed some of the military's most elite units, and walking through its corridors always reminded him of his ultimate goal, earning a place among the Special Forces community. He had submitted his application for Delta Force selection 3 months earlier and was still waiting for approval to attend the grueling assessment course. The briefing room contained a mix of personnel he recognized and others whose presence surprised him. Colonel James Harrison sat at the head of the polished conference table, his weathered face bearing the kind of expression that suggested this meeting would be anything but routine. Rodriguez knew Harrison by reputation, a decorated veteran with multiple combat deployments who commanded respect throughout the entire base. "Take a seat, Lieutenant," Harrison said without looking up from the manila folder spread before him. "We have a situation that requires immediate attention." Rodriguez settled into one of the metal chairs, noting the presence of several other officers whose unit patches he didn't immediately recognize. Their equipment looked different too, more advanced, with modifications that suggested access to resources beyond standard military issue. One woman in particular caught his attention. She appeared to be in her early 30s, with auburn hair pulled back in a regulation bun and green eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of the room with practiced efficiency. "We've received intelligence about a potential security breach," Harrison continued, finally looking up. "Someone has been accessing classified information systems using credentials that shouldn't exist. The pattern suggests inside knowledge of our operational security protocols." Rodriguez leaned forward slightly, his interest piqued. Cybersecurity threats were becoming increasingly common, and he had completed several training courses on digital warfare during his officer development program. "What kind of information was accessed, sir?" "Personnel files, mission reports, and communication logs from various special operations units," Harrison replied. "The breach appears to have been ongoing for several weeks before our security systems detected the unauthorized access patterns." The woman Rodriguez had noticed earlier shifted in her seat, and he caught a glimpse of something that made him do a double take. A small patch on her uniform sleeve depicted a skull wearing a beret, surrounded by wings and crossed swords. The design was unlike anything he had seen before, and the craftsmanship suggested it wasn't standard military issue. "Lieutenant Rodriguez," Harrison said, drawing his attention back to the briefing, "your record indicates extensive experience with intelligence gathering and analysis. We need someone to coordinate with our investigation team to identify potential suspects within the base personnel." Rodriguez nodded, though he couldn't help but feel slightly disappointed. Intelligence analysis was important work, but it wasn't the kind of high-stakes mission he had been hoping for when he received orders to report to the Special Operations Building. "Of course, sir. When do we begin?" "Immediately." The woman spoke for the first time, her voice carrying a slight accent he couldn't quite place. "Time is critical in these situations. The longer we delay, the more damage can be done to ongoing operations." Harrison gestured toward her. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, this is Agent Sarah Chen. She'll be leading the investigation." Rodriguez extended his hand for a professional handshake, noting Chen's firm grip and the calluses on her palms that suggested extensive weapons training. "Pleased to meet you, Agent Chen. What agency are you with?" Chen's expression remained neutral as she replied, "I work with various departments as needed. My current assignment is resolving this security breach before it compromises any active missions." The vague response triggered Rodriguez's instincts that something wasn't quite right about this situation. In his experience, federal agents were usually quite specific about their organizational affiliations, especially when working with military personnel. Chen's evasiveness felt deliberate, though he couldn't determine why she would need to be secretive about her background. "The investigation will require access to personnel records, duty rosters, and communication logs," Chen continued. Lieutenant Rodriguez, I understand you have security clearance that would allow access to these materials? Yes, ma'am, Rodriguez replied, though he was already beginning to formulate questions about the scope of this investigation. However, some of the information you mentioned would require additional authorization levels. That's been arranged. You'll have temporary elevated clearance for the duration of this investigation. Rodriguez felt his eyebrows rise slightly. Temporary security clearance upgrades were extremely rare and typically required extensive background checks and approval from multiple levels of command. The fact that such arrangements had already been made suggested this investigation was far more significant than Harrison's initial briefing had indicated. Sir, Rodriguez addressed Harrison directly. Can you provide more details about the nature of the compromised information? Understanding what was accessed might help narrow down potential suspects. Harrison's expression became even more serious. The accessed files included operational details for missions conducted by units that officially don't exist, the kind of information that could compromise the safety of personnel who are currently deployed in sensitive locations around the world. The weight of that statement settled over Rodriguez like a heavy blanket. He had heard rumors about ghost units, special operations teams that conducted missions so classified that their existence was denied by official channels. The idea that someone had gained access to information about such operations represented a security breach of catastrophic proportions. How many people have access to that level of classified material? Rodriguez asked. Fewer than 50 individuals on this entire base, Chen replied. Which is why we need to move quickly. A suspect pool that's small should be manageable, but only if we can identify behavioral patterns or other indicators, before whoever is responsible realizes we're investigating. Rodriguez nodded, though something about Chen's response bothered him. Her knowledge of the security protocols and clearance levels seemed remarkably detailed for someone who claimed to work with various departments. Most federal agents he had worked with required extensive briefings before they could navigate military classification systems effectively. What's our first step? Rodriguez asked. Chen opened a tablet device and showed him a list of names. We start by reviewing the access logs for anyone who has viewed classified files in the past month. Cross-reference those names with duty schedules, leave requests, and any unusual behavior reported by supervisors or colleagues. Rodriguez studied the list, recognizing several names of officers he knew personally. The idea that one of his colleagues might be responsible for such a serious security breach was difficult to accept, but he understood that personal relationships couldn't interfere with a thorough investigation. I'll need to access the personnel database, Rodriguez said. That will require going to the secure terminal in the intelligence office. I'll accompany you, Chen replied immediately. Security protocols require that I maintain oversight of all investigation activities. Rodriguez found himself studying Chen more carefully as they prepared to leave the briefing room. Her equipment was definitely non-standard, with modifications that suggested access to advanced technology not typically available to federal agents. The patch on her sleeve remained partially obscured, but he was becoming increasingly curious about its significance. They walked across the base in relative silence, with Chen occasionally making notes on her tablet device. Rodriguez noticed that she moved with the kind of fluid awareness that came from extensive combat training, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings in a pattern that suggested she was automatically identifying potential threats and escape routes. The intelligence office was located in a basement level of one of the base's administrative buildings. Rodriguez used his key card to access the secure area, noting that Chen produced her own credentials when prompted by the security system. The fact that she had independent access to highly classified areas reinforced his growing suspicion that her official role was more significant than she had indicated. The secure terminal required both Rodriguez's credentials and biometric confirmation before granting access to the personnel database. Chen positioned herself where she could observe the screen while maintaining a clear view of the office entrance. Start with personnel who have been on base for less than 2 years, Chen suggested. New arrivals are statistically more likely to have divided loyalties or external pressures that might motivate them to compromise security. Rodriguez began pulling up files, though he couldn't shake the feeling that Chen's investigative approach was more sophisticated than what he would expect from a typical federal agent. Her suggestions demonstrated intimate knowledge of security vulnerability patterns and counterintelligence protocols that usually required specialized training. They spent the next 3 hours reviewing personnel files and cross-referencing access logs. Rodriguez found the work intellectually engaging, though he remained puzzled by several aspects of the investigation. Chen seemed to know exactly which files to examine and which personnel records would be most relevant, almost as if she had conducted similar investigations before. There, Chen pointed to an entry on the screen. Staff Sergeant Williams accessed classified files outside his normal duty hours on 6 separate occasions over the past month. Rodriguez pulled up Williams' personnel file, noting that the sergeant had recently returned from a deployment to an undisclosed location in Eastern Europe. His record showed exemplary service with no disciplinary actions or security violations. His access pattern is unusual, Rodriguez admitted, but his record doesn't suggest any red flags that would indicate potential security risks. Chen made additional notes on her tablet. Sometimes the cleanest records are the most suspicious. Someone planning to compromise security would be careful to maintain an exemplary public profile. Rodriguez was beginning to appreciate Chen's analytical approach, though he still couldn't identify the source of his growing unease about this entire investigation. Something felt orchestrated about the way events were unfolding, almost as if Chen knew more about the security breach than she was admitting. "We should interview Williams directly," Rodriguez suggested. "Face-to-face conversation might reveal information that doesn't appear in his personnel file." Chen nodded, agreed. "But we need to approach this carefully. If Williams is responsible for the security breach, alerting him to our investigation could prompt him to destroy evidence or flee." Rodriguez felt a chill as he considered the implications. Military personnel who compromised national security faced court-martial proceedings that could result in lengthy prison sentences or even execution in extreme cases. The stakes were higher than he had initially realized. "How do you want to handle the interview?" Rodriguez asked. Chen closed her tablet and stood up from the terminal. "We'll approach it as a routine security review. Williams won't know he's under suspicion unless he gives us reason to escalate our questioning." As they prepared to leave the intelligence office, Rodriguez caught another glimpse of the patch on Chen's sleeve. This time, he was certain that the design was unlike anything in the standard military inventory. The skull and cross swords were rendered in a style that suggested the patch had been custom-made by someone with access to specialized manufacturing resources. They located Staff Sergeant Williams in the motor pool, where he was supervising maintenance on several tactical vehicles. Rodriguez observed Williams' demeanor carefully as they approached, looking for any signs of nervousness or unusual behavior. "Staff Sergeant Williams," Rodriguez called out as they approached, "we need to speak with you about a security matter." Williams turned toward them, his expression showing mild curiosity rather than concern. "Of course, sir. What can I help you with?" Chen stepped forward, producing her credentials. "I'm Agent Chen, conducting a routine security review. We'd like to ask you a few questions about your recent access to classified systems." "Sure thing. Is there a problem with something I accessed?" Rodriguez watched Williams carefully during the questioning, noting that the sergeant's responses seemed genuine and his body language didn't suggest deception. Chen asked detailed questions about Williams' work schedule and the specific files he had accessed, but Williams provided straightforward answers that corresponded with the information they had reviewed in his personnel file. After 20 minutes of questioning, Rodriguez was beginning to doubt that Williams was their suspect. The sergeant's explanations for his unusual access patterns were reasonable, and his demeanor suggested someone who was genuinely trying to be helpful rather than someone attempting to conceal criminal activity. Chen seemed to reach the same conclusion. "Thank you for your cooperation, Staff Sergeant. We may have additional questions later, but that's all for now." As they walked away from the motor pool, Rodriguez felt compelled to voice his growing concerns about their investigation approach. "Agent Chen, I have to ask, what's your background in counterintelligence? Your questioning techniques and analytical methods suggest specialized training that goes beyond typical federal agent preparation." It's about history turning to face Rodriguez with an expression that was difficult to read. For a moment, he thought she might provide a direct answer to his question. Instead, she glanced around to ensure they weren't being overheard before responding. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, there are aspects of this investigation that are more complex than they initially appear. I need you to trust that I'm working in the best interests of national security, even if I can't provide complete details about my background or methods." Rodriguez felt his frustration beginning to build. Military culture emphasized transparency and clear chains of command, and Chen's evasiveness violated both principles. Ma'am, with respect, I need to understand who I'm working with and what authority you're operating under. This investigation involves personnel under my command structure, and I have a responsibility to ensure proper protocols are followed. Chen was quiet for several seconds before responding. Your concerns are noted, Lieutenant. However, the nature of this investigation requires certain operational security measures that preclude complete transparency at this time. Rodriguez realized that Chen's response was essentially a polite way of telling him that he didn't have sufficient security clearance to understand the full scope of their mission. The implication stung, particularly since he had always prided himself on being trusted with sensitive information and important responsibilities. They continued their investigation throughout the afternoon, interviewing 3 more personnel who had accessed classified systems during the relevant time period. Each interview followed the same pattern. Chen would ask sophisticated questions that demonstrated intimate knowledge of security protocols, while Rodriguez observed for behavioral indicators that might suggest deception or guilt. By late afternoon, Rodriguez was beginning to question whether they were pursuing the right investigative approach. None of their suspects had exhibited behavior that suggested involvement in a security breach, and their access patterns all had reasonable explanations when examined in context. Agent Chen, Rodriguez said as they concluded their final interview of the day. I'm not seeing evidence that any of these personnel are responsible for compromising classified information. Maybe we need to consider alternative explanations for the security breach. Chen checked her tablet before responding. What alternatives are you considering? Rodriguez had been thinking about this question for several hours. External intrusion, compromised communication systems, or possibly even a false positive in the security monitoring software. The personnel we've interviewed today don't fit the profile of someone who would risk their career and freedom to sell classified information. Chen nodded thoughtfully. Those are all valid possibilities that deserve consideration. However, we can't eliminate the possibility of insider involvement until we've completed a thorough investigation. Rodriguez was preparing to respond when his attention was drawn to movement across the training yard. A small group of personnel in non-standard uniforms were conducting what appeared to be an equipment inspection near one of the aircraft hangars. Even from a distance, Rodriguez could tell that their gear was significantly more advanced than standard military issue. Who are those personnel? Rodriguez asked, pointing toward the group. Chen followed his gaze, and Rodriguez thought he detected a subtle change in her posture. Special operations personnel conducting routine training exercises. Rodriguez studied the distant figures more carefully. Their movement patterns and equipment suggested they were preparing for a mission rather than conducting routine training. More importantly, he was beginning to recognize similarities between their gear and the advanced equipment Chen had been carrying throughout their investigation. A suspicion began forming in Rodriguez's mind as he considered the timing of events. The security breach investigation had begun immediately after these personnel had arrived on base. Chen's knowledge of classified protocols was far more extensive than any federal agent should possess, and the patch on her sleeve was unlike anything in the standard military inventory. Agent Chen, Rodriguez said carefully, I need to ask you a direct question. Are you actually a federal agent, or are you part of a military unit that officially doesn't exist? Chen turned to face him fully, her green eyes studying his expression with the kind of intensity that suggested she was making an important decision. For the first time since they had met, Rodriguez saw her carefully constructed facade beginning to crack. Lieutenant Rodriguez, she said quietly, what I'm about to tell you is classified at a level that requires your absolute discretion. The investigation we've been conducting is not what it appears to be. Rodriguez felt his pulse quicken as Chen's words hung in the air between them. The afternoon sun was beginning to set behind the aircraft hangars, casting long shadows across the training yard where they stood. Everything about this investigation had felt wrong from the beginning, but he hadn't been prepared for Chen's admission that their entire mission was built on deception. What do you mean, not what it appears to be? Rodriguez asked, keeping his voice low despite his growing frustration. I've spent an entire day helping you investigate personnel under my command based on the assumption that we were dealing with a legitimate security breach. Chen glanced around once more to ensure their privacy before responding. There is a security breach, Lieutenant. But the compromised information wasn't accessed by anyone on this base. The investigation was a cover story designed to explain my presence here, while I conducted a different kind of operation. Rodriguez felt anger building in his chest. Military culture was built on trust and honesty between service members, and Chen's deception violated fundamental principles he had sworn to uphold. So you've been lying to me for the past 8 hours? Using me as cover for some kind of unauthorized mission? Not unauthorized, Chen replied firmly, but classified at a level that required operational security measures you're not cleared to know about. At least, not until now. Rodriguez studied Chen's face, searching for any indication that she was continuing to deceive him. Her expression had changed since her admission. The careful neutrality she had maintained throughout the day was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like relief. I need you to explain everything, Rodriguez said. Right now. No more evasions. No more classified excuses. If you expect me to continue working with you, I need to know who you really are and what we're actually doing here. Chen checked her watch before responding. The group of personnel you noticed near the hangars, they're my team. We're here to extract a high-value asset who has been providing intelligence about terrorist activities in the Middle East. The asset is currently embedded within a cell that's planning an attack on American interests overseas. Rodriguez felt his world shift as he processed this information. You're talking about an active counterterrorism operation on American soil. The asset requested extraction through channels that bypassed normal diplomatic procedures, Chen continued. Our intelligence indicates the terrorist cell suspects the asset's true loyalties and plans to eliminate them within the next 48 hours. We have a narrow window to conduct the extraction before the opportunity is lost permanently. Rodriguez realized that everything he thought he understood about Chen and their investigation had been carefully constructed misdirection. And my role in this operation? Chen hesitated before answering. Originally, you were simply meant to provide cover for my presence on base. Colonel Harrison was told that a federal agent needed access to conduct a security investigation, and you were assigned to assist. Your security clearance and reputation for discretion made you an ideal choice for maintaining operational cover. Rodriguez felt a mixture of anger and fascination as he considered the complexity of the deception. But something changed. You're telling me this now, which means either the mission parameters have evolved or you've decided I can be trusted with classified information. Chen nodded slowly. Both, actually. The extraction has become more complicated than we initially anticipated, and we may need additional personnel who can operate effectively under pressure. Your military record suggests you have the skills and temperament we need. Rodriguez studied the distant personnel near the hangars with new understanding. Their advanced equipment and non-standard uniforms suddenly made sense if they were part of a ghost team conducting classified operations. What kind of complications are we talking about? The terrorist cell has changed locations twice in the past week, Chen explained. Our latest intelligence indicates they're planning to move the asset to a secure facility where extraction will be nearly impossible. We have approximately 18 hours to locate and retrieve the asset before they disappear permanently. Rodriguez felt his professional instincts engaging despite his anger about being deceived. What's the nature of the intelligence this asset has been providing? Chen's expression became even more serious. Details about a coordinated attack involving multiple targets across 3 continents. The kind of intelligence that could prevent thousands of casualties if we can get the asset to safety and conduct a proper debriefing. The weight of that information settled over Rodriguez like a physical presence. Despite his frustration with Chen's deception, he understood that the mission she was describing represented exactly the kind of high-stakes operation he had been hoping to participate in when he submitted his application for Special Forces selection. Why are you telling me this now? Rodriguez asked. What's changed that makes my involvement necessary? Chen pulled her tablet from her tactical vest and showed him a satellite image. The terrorist cell is currently located in a warehouse district approximately 40 miles from this base. Our original extraction plan relied on inserting the team by helicopter during the early morning hours when security would be minimal. Rodriguez studied the image, noting the industrial buildings and limited access routes that would make helicopter insertion challenging. I'm guessing something has compromised that plan. Local law enforcement has increased patrols in that area due to recent break-ins. Chen replied. A helicopter insertion would almost certainly be observed and reported, which could compromise the entire operation and put the asset at risk. Rodriguez began to see where his involvement might be necessary. You need an alternative insertion method that won't attract attention from local authorities. Ground insertion using military vehicles that could be explained as routine training exercises. The kind of operation that would benefit from having an officer with legitimate reason to be conducting training in that area. Rodriguez felt his pulse quicken as he considered the implications. Chen was offering him the opportunity to participate in exactly the kind of mission he had been training for throughout his military career. At the same time, he understood that accepting would mean crossing into a world of classified operations where the normal rules and protections might not apply. What exactly would my role be? Rodriguez asked. Chen gestured toward her team members near the hangars. Command a small convoy of military vehicles that would transport my team to the target area. Provide overwatch during the extraction operation and coordinate with local authorities if our presence requires explanation. Rodriguez realized that Chen was describing a mission that would require him to lie to fellow service members and potentially violate regulations he had sworn to uphold. And after the extraction, what happens to me then? That depends on how well the operation goes, Chen replied honestly. If everything proceeds smoothly, you'll be debriefed by personnel who will ensure your discretion about the events. Your record will show that you conducted a routine training exercise that occurred without incident. Rodriguez understood the unspoken implications of Chen's answer. If the operation went badly, his involvement could result in serious legal and professional consequences that might end his military career. And if I refuse to participate? Chen's expression remained neutral. Then we'll proceed with our original plan and accept the additional risks. You'll continue your normal duties, and this conversation never happened. Rodriguez found himself in an impossible situation. Everything about his training and professional ethics suggested he should report this conversation to his superiors and distance himself from what appeared to be an unauthorized operation. At the same time, Chen's description of the intelligence at stake suggested that thousands of lives might depend on the success of their mission. I need more information, Rodriguez said finally. If you expect me to risk my career and potentially my freedom, I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Chen seemed to have expected this response. What specific information do you need? Rodriguez organized his thoughts before responding. First, I need proof that this operation has legitimate authorization from appropriate authorities. Second, I need to understand the full scope of the risks involved. And third, I need to know why a team with your apparent capabilities requires assistance from someone at my level. Chen considered his demands for several seconds before reaching into her tactical vest and producing a device Rodriguez didn't recognize. This is a secure communication terminal that will connect you directly to the operations center overseeing this mission. You can speak with the commanding authority and verify our authorization. Rodriguez accepted the device, noting its advanced construction and the multiple security features that suggested military-grade encryption. And the other questions? The risks are substantial, Chen admitted. We're operating in a gray area where normal legal protections may not apply if something goes wrong. As for why we need your assistance, our team specializes in direct action operations, but we don't have experience coordinating with local authorities or maintaining operational cover in domestic environments. Rodriguez understood that Chen was being honest about the dangers involved. Special operations units often operated under legal frameworks that provided broad authority but limited protection for individual operators if missions were compromised or discovered. He activated the secure communication device, noting that it required both voice recognition and biometric confirmation before establishing a connection. After several seconds, a voice answered that carried the kind of authority that suggested very senior military leadership. Lieutenant Rodriguez, the voice said without preamble. I understand you've been read into Operation Silent Guardian. Do you have questions about the mission parameters? Rodriguez felt a chill as he realized that whoever was speaking knew his name and rank despite never having spoken with him before. Yes, sir. I need confirmation that this operation has proper authorization and that my potential involvement is approved by appropriate command authorities. Operation Silent Guardian is authorized under Presidential Finding 202507, which grants specific authority for counterterrorism operations involving imminent threats to American interests. The voice replied, Your involvement is approved if you choose to accept the assignment, but participation is entirely voluntary. Rodriguez realized he was speaking with someone who had access to the highest levels of government authorization. Presidential findings were the most classified form of operational authority, typically reserved for missions involving national security threats that required immediate action. Sir, what are the consequences if this operation is compromised or discovered? Rodriguez asked. There was a pause before the voice responded. All personnel involved in Operation Silent Guardian are covered under the Classified Operations Protection Protocols established by National Security Directive 47. However, those protections are contingent on successful mission completion and absolute operational security. Rodriguez understood that the answer was both reassuring and ominous. He would have legal protection if the mission succeeded, but those protections might not apply if something went wrong or if operational security was compromised. Thank you, sir, Rodriguez said before terminating the connection and returning the device to Chen. Chen studied his expression carefully. What's your decision, Lieutenant? Rodriguez looked toward the hangars where Chen's team was continuing their equipment preparations. Everything about this situation violated the normal procedures and chain of command structures he had relied on throughout his military career. At the same time, he understood that special operations often required flexibility and initiative that couldn't be achieved through standard bureaucratic channels. I have conditions, Rodriguez said finally. First, I want to meet your team and understand their capabilities before I commit to anything. Second, I want a detailed briefing about the target location and expected opposition. And third, I want confirmation that we have contingency plans if something goes wrong. Chen nodded approvingly. Those are reasonable demands. Let's go meet the team. And they walked across the training yard toward the hangars, with Rodriguez noting that Chen's posture had changed subtly since her admission about the true nature of their mission. She moved with the kind of confidence that suggested she was finally operating in her natural element, rather than maintaining an artificial cover identity. As they approached the hangars, Rodriguez could see that Chen's team consisted of 5 personnel who were conducting what appeared to be a final equipment check. Their gear was unlike anything he had seen before: weapons, communication devices, and protective equipment that looked several generations more advanced than standard military issue. Team, Chen called as they approached. We have a potential addition to tonight's operation. The team members turned toward them, and Rodriguez felt himself being evaluated by individuals who clearly possessed extensive combat experience. Their faces showed the kind of alertness and controlled aggression that came from years of high-risk operations in hostile environments. Chen gestured toward a tall man with graying hair who appeared to be the senior team member. Lieutenant Rodriguez, this is Master Sergeant Thompson. He's our team leader and has been conducting special operations for the past 15 years. Thompson extended his hand with a firm grip. Lieutenant Sarah tells me you might be joining our little expedition tonight. Rodriguez appreciated Thompson's direct approach. I'm still evaluating the situation, Master Sergeant. I'd like to understand what I'd be getting into before I make any commitments. Thompson nodded approvingly. Smart thinking. Let me show you what we're dealing with. He led Rodriguez to a table where satellite images and tactical maps were spread out alongside communication equipment and weapons that Rodriguez had never seen before. The level of detail and preparation suggested that Chen's team had been planning this operation for weeks or possibly months. Our target is located here. Thompson pointed to a mark on one of the satellite images. Industrial warehouse in a district that's primarily used for legitimate commercial operations during daytime hours. The terrorist cell has been using the building as a safe house while they finalize plans for their attack. Rodriguez studied the images, noting the access routes and potential complications that could arise during an extraction operation. How many hostiles are we expecting? Intelligence suggests between 8 and 12 individuals, Thompson replied, all with military or paramilitary training and probably equipped with automatic weapons and explosives. Rodriguez felt his stomach tighten as he considered the odds. Chen's team was highly trained, but they would be significantly outnumbered if they encountered the full strength of the terrorist cell. Chen seemed to read his concerns. Our advantage is surprise and superior equipment. The cell doesn't know we've located them, and they're not expecting an extraction attempt. Thompson pointed to additional details on the tactical maps. The asset is being held on the second floor of the building. Our plan is to insert through this loading dock entrance, neutralize any guards we encounter, and extract the asset through the same route. Rodriguez realized that the operation Chen was describing would require precise timing and coordination to avoid casualties among both the extraction team and the asset they were attempting to rescue. What's the expected duration from insertion to extraction? No more than 20 minutes, Thompson replied. We'll have vehicles positioned here and here for immediate exfiltration once we've secured the asset. Rodriguez studied the maps more carefully, noting several potential complications that could extend the timeline or require improvised solutions. What if the asset is injured or unable to move quickly? What if we encounter more opposition than expected? Thompson exchanged a glance with Chen before responding. Those are the kinds of contingencies where having additional personnel could make the difference between mission success and failure. Rodriguez understood that Thompson was acknowledging the value his participation could provide while also emphasizing the risks involved. What would my specific responsibilities be? Chen pulled out a different map showing the routes between Fort Bragg and the target location. You'd command a convoy of 3 military vehicles that would transport our team to a staging area approximately 2 miles from the target. Once we begin the extraction, you'd maintain communication with local authorities and provide cover stories if our presence is discovered. Rodriguez realized that Chen was offering him a role that would be challenging but not necessarily suicidal. And during the actual extraction operation? You'd remain with the vehicles and coordinate our exfiltration route, Thompson replied. If everything goes according to plan, you wouldn't be directly involved in the combat operations. Rodriguez appreciated the honesty, though he understood that special operations rarely proceeded exactly according to plan. What happens if you encounter complications that require additional personnel? Chen and Thompson exchanged another glance before Chen responded. Then we'd call for your assistance and trust that your training and judgment would guide your decisions. Rodriguez realized that accepting this mission would require him to trust his life and career to people he had known for less than 12 hours. At the same time, everything he had learned about their operation suggested that thousands of lives might depend on its success. I need a few minutes to consider this, Rodriguez said. Thompson nodded. Take your time. We don't insert until 0200 hours, so you have time to think it through. Rodriguez walked away from the group, moving toward the edge of the hangar where he could observe the activity on the base while processing everything he had learned. The normal evening routine was continuing around him, personnel completing their duties, vehicles being serviced, and the steady rhythm of military life proceeding without any indication of the classified operation being planned just a few hundred yards away. He thought about his application for Delta Force selection and his long-term goals of participating in special operations. Chen's mission represented exactly the kind of challenge he had been preparing for, but accepting would mean crossing a line that could fundamentally change his military career. Rodriguez also considered the intelligence Chen had described about preventing a terrorist attack that could kill thousands of people. If that information was accurate, refusing to participate might mean that he would bear some responsibility for the consequences of mission failure. After 20 minutes of careful consideration, Rodriguez walked back to where Chen's team was finalizing their preparations. Rodriguez approached Chen's team with a mixture of determination and apprehension that he had never experienced before in his military career. The decision to participate in Operation Silent Guardian represented a fundamental shift from the structured, predictable world of conventional military operations into the shadowy realm of special operations, where success depended on adaptation, initiative, and split-second decision-making under extreme pressure. "I'm in," Rodriguez announced as he rejoined the group around the equipment table. "But I want to understand every aspect of the operation before we begin." Thompson looked up from the weapons he was checking and nodded approvingly. "Good choice, Lieutenant. Let's walk through the entire timeline so everyone knows exactly what to expect." Chen spread a detailed timeline across the table alongside the tactical maps they had been reviewing earlier. "We depart Fort Bragg at 23:30 hours using 3 vehicles that will appear to be conducting routine training exercises. The route takes us through back roads that avoid major population centers and minimize our exposure to civilian observation." Rodriguez studied the planned route, noting that it had been carefully selected to use military reservation roads for as long as possible before transitioning to public highways. "What's our cover story if we're stopped by local law enforcement?" "Night navigation training exercise," Thompson replied immediately. You'll have documentation showing that your unit has authorization to conduct training operations in that area between midnight and 0400 hours. Rodriguez appreciated the thoroughness of their planning, though he understood that even the best cover stories could become problematic if examined too closely by suspicious authorities. What about our equipment? Some of this gear isn't going to look like standard training material. Chen gestured toward several large cases that had been positioned near the vehicles. Everything gets packed in cases that are marked as communication equipment for the training exercise. The unusual items won't be visible during transport. Rodriguez realized that Chen's team had clearly conducted similar operations before, based on their attention to details that wouldn't occur to someone without extensive experience in covert operations. Walk me through what happens once we reach the target area. Thompson pulled out a more detailed map of the warehouse district where their target was located. We stage here, in this industrial parking area that provides concealment for our vehicles while maintaining rapid access to multiple exfiltration routes. You'll remain with the convoy and maintain radio contact while we conduct the extraction. Rodriguez studied the staging area location, noting its proximity to major highways that could provide rapid escape routes if the operation was compromised. How long do you expect the extraction to take? 20 minutes maximum from insertion to exfiltration, Chen replied. If we're not back within 30 minutes, you abort the staging position and return to base immediately. Rodriguez felt a chill as he considered the implications of that contingency plan. What happens to you if something goes wrong and I have to abort? Thompson's expression remained neutral as he answered. Then we handle the situation using our training and experience. Your responsibility is to ensure that operational security is maintained and that the mission doesn't compromise Fort Bragg or any personnel who aren't directly involved. Rodriguez understood that Thompson was telling him that protecting the larger operation took priority over rescuing individual team members who encountered difficulties. The cold calculation was exactly what he would expect from professional special operations personnel, but it still felt uncomfortable to accept. Let's review the communication protocols, Chen said, producing a radio device that looked more advanced than anything Rodriguez had used before. You'll monitor our progress using this encrypted channel. We'll provide status updates every 5 minutes during the extraction phase. Rodriguez examined the radio, noting features that suggested capabilities far beyond standard military communication equipment. What if you lose communication? How will I know whether to maintain position or abort? If we lose communication for more than 10 minutes, you assume the operation has been compromised and begin immediate exfiltration, Thompson replied. No exceptions, no attempts to establish contact or provide assistance. Rodriguez nodded, though every instinct he possessed as a military officer rebelled against the idea of abandoning his personnel in a hostile situation. Understood. What about the asset we're extracting? What can you tell me about this person? Chen hesitated before responding. The asset is a Turkish national who has been embedded with a terrorist cell for the past 18 months. The intelligence they've provided has already prevented 2 separate attacks on American diplomatic facilities in the Middle East. Rodriguez realized that Chen was describing someone who had risked their life for an extended period to provide critical intelligence about terrorist activities. How did this person end up in a position where extraction became necessary? The cell leadership became suspicious about information security after their last planned attack was interdicted by local authorities, Thompson explained. They've been conducting internal security reviews that could expose the asset's true loyalties at any time. Rodriguez understood the urgency that was driving the timeline for this operation. If the asset was exposed as an intelligence source, they would almost certainly be executed by the terrorist cell before any rescue attempt could be mounted. What kind of condition should we expect the asset to be in? Rodriguez asked. Chen's expression darkened. Intelligence suggests the asset has been subjected to preliminary interrogation procedures. They may be injured and will definitely be under significant psychological stress. Rodriguez felt his anger building as he considered what Chen was describing. The idea that someone who had risked everything to provide intelligence about terrorist threats was being tortured by the very people they had been trying to stop seemed particularly unjust. How do we know the asset is still alive? Rodriguez asked. Thompson pointed to one of the communication devices on the equipment table. We received a coded transmission 18 hours ago that confirmed the asset's status and location. The message also indicated that the cell plans to relocate within the next 48 hours. Rodriguez realized that the time pressure Chen had described was real and immediate. Missing this extraction window could mean losing the asset permanently, along with any additional intelligence they might be able to provide about future terrorist operations. "All right," Rodriguez said. "I understand the mission parameters. What do I need to do to prepare?" Chen gestured toward a set of tactical gear that had been laid out separately from the team's equipment. "First, you'll need to change into gear that's appropriate for the operation. Standard military utilities could attract attention if we encounter civilian authorities." Rodriguez examined the clothing, noting that it appeared to be civilian outdoor gear that would allow him to blend in with the industrial environment around their target location. "What about weapons?" Thompson handed him a sidearm that Rodriguez recognized as a newer model than his standard service weapon. "Hopefully you won't need it, but it's better to be prepared for complications." Rodriguez checked the weapon carefully, noting its excellent condition and the additional magazines that Thompson provided along with the holster. "What about body armor?" There, Chen pointed to a vest that looked significantly more advanced than standard military issue. "Lightweight ceramic plates that will stop rifle rounds without restricting your mobility." Rodriguez began changing into the operational gear, finding that everything fit properly and had clearly been selected specifically for his size and requirements. The attention to detail suggested that Chen's team had been planning for his potential involvement longer than they had initially indicated. As he completed his preparations, Rodriguez noticed that the other team members were conducting final equipment checks with the kind of methodical precision that indicated extensive training and experience. Their movements were economical and purposeful, without any wasted motion or unnecessary conversation. "Time to move," Thompson announced after checking his watch. "We want to arrive at the staging area with enough time to conduct final reconnaissance before beginning the extraction." Rodriguez felt his pulse quicken as the reality of the situation settled over him. In less than 3 hours, he would be participating in a classified counterterrorism operation that could determine whether thousands of innocent people lived or died. The magnitude of that responsibility was both terrifying and exhilarating. They loaded their equipment into 3 vehicles that appeared to be standard military transport trucks, though Rodriguez noticed modifications that suggested enhanced performance capabilities. Chen took the passenger seat in his vehicle while Thompson and the other team members distributed themselves among the 3 trucks. The drive from Fort Bragg proceeded exactly as planned, with their convoy maintaining proper spacing and following the predetermined route through military reservation roads before transitioning to public highways. Rodriguez found himself checking the mirrors frequently, though he saw no indication that their movement was attracting any unwanted attention. Chen remained largely silent during the drive, occasionally checking her tablet device or making notes on the tactical maps. Rodriguez appreciated her focus, though he found himself wanting to ask additional questions about the operation they were about to conduct. "Agent Chen," Rodriguez said quietly as they approached the halfway point of their route. "I know you can't tell me everything about your background, but I'd like to understand how someone ends up doing this kind of work." Chen looked up from her tablet, studying Rodriguez's expression in the dim light from the dashboard. "Most of us start in conventional military units and demonstrate particular aptitudes for unconventional operations. The transition usually happens gradually, with increasing levels of responsibility and security clearance." Rodriguez understood that Chen was describing a career path similar to what he had been hoping to achieve through Delta Force selection. "How long have you been doing this?" 7 years, Chen replied. "Started as a military intelligence analyst, then moved into field operations when it became clear that I had useful skills for direct action missions." Rodriguez realized that Chen was probably close to his own age, despite her obvious expertise in complex operations. "Do you ever miss the predictability of conventional military service?" Chen smiled slightly. "Sometimes, but this work provides opportunities to make a real difference in ways that aren't possible through normal channels. Tonight, if everything goes well, we'll save someone's life and potentially prevent a terrorist attack that could kill thousands of people." Rodriguez understood exactly what Chen meant. Despite the risks and uncertainty, Operation Silent Guardian represented the kind of mission that defined why he had chosen a military career in the first place. They reached the staging area at 0145 hours, parking their vehicles in positions that provided concealment while maintaining rapid access to the extraction routes. Rodriguez established communication with Thompson's team and confirmed that all equipment was functioning properly. Final briefing, Thompson announced as they gathered around the tactical maps one last time. Intelligence indicates normal security patterns at the target location. 2 guards on the ground floor, unknown number of personnel on the second floor where the asset is being held. Rodriguez studied the building layout, noting the multiple entry points and potential complications that could arise during the extraction. What if the guards are alerted before you can neutralize them? Then we adapt, Chen replied simply. Special operations require flexibility and the ability to improvise solutions when original plans encounter unexpected obstacles. Rodriguez realized that Chen's answer reflected the fundamental difference between conventional military operations and special operations. Instead of following rigid procedures, successful special operations personnel needed to think creatively under pressure and make critical decisions with incomplete information. Communications check, Thompson said, activating his radio equipment. Lieutenant Rodriguez, confirm you're receiving our transmission clearly. Rodriguez checked his own radio, noting the excellent signal quality and encryption features that would prevent interception by unauthorized personnel. Loud and clear, Master Sergeant. Thompson looked at his team members, receiving nods that indicated their readiness to begin the extraction phase. We're moving to insertion point. Maintain radio contact and be prepared for immediate exfiltration if required. Rodriguez watched through night vision equipment as Chen's team moved toward the target building with the fluid coordination that indicated extensive training in small unit tactics. Their movement was nearly silent, and they disappeared into the shadows around the warehouse within minutes of leaving the staging area. Status report, Rodriguez whispered into his radio after 5 minutes had elapsed. Insertion complete, came Thompson's response. Ground floor secured, moving to second floor. Rodriguez felt his tension building as he realized that Chen's team was now committed to the most dangerous phase of their operation. Any complications from this point forward could result in casualties or mission failure that might have far-reaching consequences. Second floor accessed, Thompson reported after another 5 minutes. Asset located and secure. Beginning extraction. Rodriguez felt relief flooding through him as he realized that the most critical phase of the mission had been completed successfully. Copy that. Staging area remains clear. Exfiltration routes are open. Unexpected contact. Thompson's voice suddenly carried a note of urgency. Additional personnel arrived at the building. We're dealing with complications. Rodriguez felt his stomach drop as he realized that their carefully planned operation was encountering the kind of problems that could transform a routine extraction into a firefight. Do you need assistance? Negative, Thompson replied immediately. Maintain position and be ready for rapid exfiltration. Rodriguez found himself gripping his weapon as he listened to radio traffic that suggested Chen's team was engaged in combat operations inside the target building. Every instinct he possessed urged him to provide assistance, but his orders were clear about maintaining position regardless of complications. Exfiltration in progress, Thompson announced after what felt like hours but had actually been less than 10 minutes. Assets secured, moving to staging area. Rodriguez activated the vehicles and prepared for immediate departure as he saw Chen's team emerging from the warehouse district. Their movement was faster than during insertion, suggesting they were under pressure from pursuit or the threat of additional complications. Chen reached the staging area first, supporting someone Rodriguez assumed was the asset they had extracted. The person appeared to be injured and disoriented, but was conscious and able to move with assistance. Go, go, go! Thompson shouted as his team reached their vehicles. We need to clear the area immediately. Rodriguez began driving toward their exfiltration route, noting in his mirrors that Thompson's team was following at appropriate intervals. The asset was receiving medical attention in Chen's vehicle, though Rodriguez couldn't determine the extent of their injuries. Status report, Rodriguez requested as they reached the first checkpoint on their return route. Asset secure and stable, Chen replied. Minor injuries, but nothing life-threatening. Mission successful. Rodriguez felt a surge of satisfaction as he realized that Operation Silent Guardian had achieved its objectives despite the complications they had encountered. They had successfully extracted a critical intelligence asset and potentially prevented a terrorist attack that could have killed thousands of innocent people. The return journey to Fort Bragg proceeded without incident, though Rodriguez remained alert for any signs of pursuit or unwanted attention from local authorities. Chen's team maintained professional focus throughout the trip, though he could sense their relief at having completed such a high-risk operation successfully. They arrived at Fort Bragg at 0445 hours, parking their vehicles in the same hangar where Rodriguez had first met Chen's team 12 hours earlier. The asset was transferred to medical personnel who had been standing by, while Chen's team began the process of securing their equipment and preparing for debriefing. Lieutenant Rodriguez, Chen approached him as he completed his own equipment accountability.
You performed exceptionally well tonight. Your support was critical to our mission success.
Rodriguez realized that participating in Operation Silent Guardian had changed his perspective on special operations and his own capabilities as a military officer. Thank you, Agent Chen. This has been unlike anything I've experienced before. Thompson joined their conversation, extending his hand with obvious respect. Lieutenant, if you're serious about special operations, you should know that performance like tonight's gets noticed by people who make selection decisions. Rodriguez understood that Thompson was suggesting his participation in Operation Silent Guardian could influence his application for Delta Force selection. The implication was both exciting and sobering, as it meant his career path might be fundamentally altered by the events of the past 24 hours. What happens now? Rodriguez asked. Chen gestured toward the hangar exit where several personnel in civilian clothing were waiting. Debriefing with security personnel who will ensure operational security is maintained. After that, you return to your normal duties as if tonight never happened. Rodriguez nodded, though he understood that forgetting about Operation Silent Guardian would be impossible. The experience had provided insights into special operations capabilities and challenges that no amount of training could duplicate. As he walked toward the debriefing area, Rodriguez reflected on the events that had transformed him from a conventional military officer conducting routine duties into a participant in classified counterterrorism operations. Chen's initial deception had been frustrating, but he now understood that operational security requirements sometimes necessitated such measures. The patch on Chen's sleeve, the skull wearing a beret, surrounded by wings and crossed swords, had finally made sense when he realized she was part of a ghost team that conducted missions too sensitive for official acknowledgement. Such units operated in the shadows of military structure, taking responsibility for operations that conventional forces couldn't handle through normal channels. Rodriguez knew that his participation in Operation Silent Guardian would remain classified for years, or possibly decades, but the knowledge that he had helped save an intelligence asset and potentially prevented a terrorist attack would sustain him throughout the rest of his military career. The experience had also demonstrated that he possessed the skills and temperament necessary for special operations, which could influence his future assignments and career progression. Most importantly, Rodriguez had learned that military service sometimes required accepting responsibility for missions that existed in gray areas where normal rules and procedures didn't provide clear guidance. The decision to participate in Operation Silent Guardian had been his alone, based on his assessment of the intelligence at stake and his willingness to trust personnel whose backgrounds he couldn't fully verify. As he entered the debriefing area, Rodriguez realized that Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez, who had reported for a routine security investigation that morning, no longer existed. The events of the past day had transformed him into someone who understood the complex realities of modern military operations and the personal sacrifices required to protect national security interests. The woman who had initially frustrated him with her evasiveness and apparent deception had ultimately provided him with the most valuable training experience of his military career. Chen's patch, the symbol of ghost teams that officially didn't exist, would remain in his memory as a reminder of the night he crossed from conventional military operations into the world of special operations, where success depended on courage, adaptability, and the willingness to accept responsibility for decisions that could determine whether thousands of innocent people lived or died.